Hey everybody, welcome to my Wonderworks studio. Today we're going to be dyeing some other forms of wool. For instance, we're going to dye fleece. It's always so fun to play with this. Now, I buy this, my friend and I like to say, still has boom booms in it. I clean it all, but no matter how much we clean it, and we have to be careful, there's always a little bit of dirt on these little tail ends. And so you don't need to worry about that. I usually use Dawn dish detergent to clean this fleece. And there's even grass sometimes left in it or things they've picked up in the fields. We're going to be dyeing roving. This is what this looks like. This is basically this combed out in the same direction and made into a long rope of fibers. Now, if you've never dealt with roving, you can't break it if you try to pull it close. But if you want to break it, let's say we'll break this in the middle. You pull quite a distance away and it just pulls apart neatly and tidily. And of course, when you're spinning, you always want to start with these delicious pulled ends. Anyway, this is particularly great roving. And then we're going to be dyeing some yarn. And this yarn is not the way we want to dye yarn, although I do have a method where you can dye this yarn like this. Normally, we want to make a skein out of it, which is you make a big loop, and I'll show you that later when we're dyeing the yarn. I wanted to say that this show is brought to you by the Welcome Mat. This is where I do all my teaching and vivify and energize and inspire you. I hope you join. All the things that we do here are recorded there, and you can watch it forevermore. All of these dye dates and many other hundreds of things. And Magic Carpet Dyes, that's my dye company. That's what I like to use. And Wonderworks, of course, that houses this great opportunity for us to be able to make these videos. And I also have some sponsors this week. I want to thank Linda, Catherine, and Deb Wire for their contributions to keep this going. So I'm going to start. Well, I don't have a sheep here, but I'm going to start right where these fibers all begin, which was with fleece. And when you're dyeing fleece, you can use a lot of our dye methods. You can separate them, dye them in jars, make values by doing that. All you have to do is weigh it and make sure that you have an even amount of wool in each one. You can do spot dyes. You can do just solid colors. You can do whatever you want to do, but my fun and favorite thing to do with roving is to, especially when I'm spinning, I'm a little bit of a radical spinner. I don't want to have everything just looking like this. I like to have weirdnesses and strangenesses happen, and especially color strangenesses. So I like to do wandering when I dye fleece, and I don't sell fleece. I just do this part of dyeing for my own delicious entertainment. So I can make whatever I want. So I have pre-wet this, and we always have to be careful when we're handling this. So I have very hot water here at the studio because I wash dishes and I serve victuals. I bake for people and serve them tea when they're here. So I have to have very hot water. And I did not take that very hot fleece and put it in a cool bath. I want to be careful about the temperature at all times, especially when Synthropol is present, which is a bit of a soap. So this is what it takes to felt things. You can have temperature changes, but there has to be agitation present. And whenever we're dyeing, you always have to be careful of that, because even bubbling, if you have a very delicate fiber like cormo that wants to felt up quickly, it can be dangerous. So I'm sticking my finger in here and I'm feeling this, and they're about equal. So that's how I want to begin. I want to have this and this approximately the same temperature. So I wrote down what I was going to do, thank heavens. So when I do this, as with all wandering, I have a color that's in the pan or pot first. And I'm going to do blue first. I want to make it fairly dark wandering. So I'm going to use 1/4 teaspoon. I have to stir this up a bit because it's not quite hot enough to dissolve things, but that's nothing we really need to worry about because I'm doing this for my own joy and pleasure. Now, I don't know if I might have too much in here, and I always just judge this, and please, I did not weigh this ahead of time. So I'm just going to try to put this all in. And it could be that I have to add the dye in a different way than I would add it when I'm doing wandering too. So I want some up out of there. Okay, it really is a big mess in this studio right now. So now I can turn this up gently. And I'm kind of happy that it's somewhat undissolved because as it turns up, it'll start to dissolve and the bottom will have more color than the top. And this is the Merry Mints I'm always looking for. So I'm going to turn that up. And meanwhile, I'm going to switch. And we're going to do some roving now. Roving is delicate. It seems tough, especially when you try to break it. What? You can pull and it doesn't break. But it is really very tough in this sense. But when we get it wet, it's like dealing with fairy dust. So I always, and if I have delicate, get rid of that. If I have delicate fleeces, I also do this. So I use this pan, now, to soak it in so that I don't have to be hauling it out of the sink when it's wet, because sometimes when you put it in your sink, it kind of what I call disappears. Turns into a ghost-like substance, and you sometimes can't get a hold of it all that easily. So this is what I do. I'm not going to take all the excess water out. Now this soaking water is quite a bit dirtier than usual due to my fleece being in there, and also dealing with the yarn I have over there, because the yarn is had a lot of lanolin left in it. So it's always good to soak these things in Synthropol because it gets rid of these things. So look at this poor little creature, wherever I put this other one. Look how fat and jolly this guy is, and how skinny and reduced this is. It's like washing a cat. So when I'm dyeing roving, same with the fleece, you can dye individual pieces, single colors. You can use any dye method you want to, but I'm going to spin this. And even if you're going to hook it, it's fun to do this. I want to have sort of a long, continuous color changing event. So you can see what I'm doing here. I hope I'm going back and forth in this pan and sort of making a zigzag that's close together. Doesn't even really look like a zigzag. I don't know what you would call it. Well, a fanning. You know, when you make a fanning, you fold it back and forth, and it has some twists in it. I'm not going to get my knickers upset over that today. I'm not going to get my knickers in a twist over those twists, because normally though I'd spend more time, because the twists can create problems where you're not maybe getting the dye in a way you want to. So I'll just kind of roughly change that. So now I'm going to hold this up so you can see. So there's folds at all ends. Whoops. There's folds at all ends here, here, and here, where I have bent it back on itself. And you could see how gingerly and gentle I was being. So this might bother you that I just crammed all that in there, but I don't want you to worry. Let me just say, when it comes to dyeing fleece, I'm not that ladylike or roving either, but I do get really good results. If I wanted to too, as I said, I could just take this, wet it, put it in this jar, and get a beautiful single color out of it. And I might do that if we have time at the end. But this makes a continuous color situation. So how I'm going to apply the color is, let me see, I have 4 colors. So I'm going to apply one, and then the other, and then the other, and then the other. And then I'm going to use my handy dandy masher. Here it is here. To kind of push this dye down in. And then once I have all that done, I'm going to turn the heat on. And then I'm not going to touch it after that. It's really important that you note that. This is not something to be moving around and everything, because every time you do, of course, that's agitation, right? We don't want that. No agitation in life or dying. So here's the ridiculous thing I did. I just realized it. I went and didn't heat a pan to mix my wool or mix up my dyes for this other wool. So I'm just going to steal from this guy. It's not going to make any difference. I'll just add more water to it if I need to. This is really ad hoc. But normally you'd want to have your kettle boiling. You'd want to make sure that your water's hot enough to dissolve your dyes. And you can also cool this water down if you feel your wool is not a temperature that can take the boiling water. So also, boy, I'm really batting it out of the park today. I meant to put color here below before I laid this in. And I think I'm going to go back and do that so I can just carefully get a hold of this, get its basket or bowl or a tray. It's a tray because it takes up less room. And it's still staying in its organized way. I'm going to go ahead and put color in here first. But I have to turn this on to make that happen. You can see how cloudy the dye is, or the soaking water is when I'm doing these fleeces. So I just added a bit of water. It's like 1/8 of an inch in this pan. And I'm going to put yellow in here, but I'm going to put golden because I feel like golden. So that was about 1/8. So now when I lay my fleece down in, I'm going to make sure that I have some golden opportunities. That was fun. All right, so now this is going to be a day where my hands are going to get dirty. I'm not going to worry about that, but I do not want to have roving laying on top of roving. So I'm going to do anything I can to correct that right now, because I don't really enjoy having sudden white spots in my dyeing. Okay. So already it's sizzling away a bit. So I'm going to quickly get my next color ready. Well, actually I don't need to. I'm going to turn it off is what I'm going to do. I don't want it getting too hot. I really seem mixed up today and I apologize. I'm not. I'm just doing too many things. Okay, so next color is going to be, we have golden, moss green. One of the things about working with this seems that I always get this coating of webs on my hand of wool. I'm always rubbing my hands like that because I don't necessarily like that feeling. Okay. I'm adding 1/8 of moss green. That little bit of blue isn't going to make much difference. So I don't want to add so much water that I'm drowning this. So this is about 1/2 cup. So just on this first row or so, I'm going to add this. And I'm not going to bother mashing it down yet. It's not on, so we don't have to worry. Whatever is being given to this pot too, so good. Oh well. So the next color is going to be reddish brown. Let me see. Same measurement. It's really important too that you make sure your roving is perfectly wet. And you can see that it's not because it makes these weird opaque pearls inside that you feel like, oh, what is that strange thing? But that's just your wool that hasn't been properly dyed or hasn't been properly wet. I feel sorry for anybody that has to deal with me today. Okay, so now turquoise. And because this is kind of duller, I'm going to use my old turquoise because it matches better with this. But if you have new turquoise, you can just Add a little bit of black to it, or seal brown if you want it to be greener. Okay, so here we go. We're pouring this on. You'll notice I didn't put any acid in here yet. So now I have these two greens and a brown sandwich. And also I have my golden. So now if you look at this, you can feel like, oh, that's all taken up, but it really isn't. We kind of need to split these open. Now you can leave these if you want. It's perfectly okay. I like to shift them around a little. And sometimes, and I'm going to do that right now, I want to create some extra merriment. So I'm going to take and put some red violet on the end of my stick, which I'm going to run up and down between these as I see fit. Yeah, I say I'm going to get, here it is. I don't know how that happens. I'm blind to my own dye. So I'm just going to take this and run it up and down between some, not all. I like to have a lot of fun when I'm spinning, and I enjoy seeing color changes and interesting things happen. So I'm going to run one up through here. And then moving over here into this green, do the same. I'm going to kind of close the gate a little. I think this is going to be pretty handsome. I'll put a bit over here on the outside too. Okay. Now, you might look at this and you're not a fan of brown, and you might go, why did you do that? That looks horrible. But I have a place I want to go with this. I love a coppery color when I'm spinning. And this is going to get me a good, interesting coppery color. Okay, so I am ready to ignite the fire. Here we go. So I'm going to turn this up to about 350. I'm going to put acid on it. And now I'm not going to touch it anymore. I would like to know who comes in here and tightens the lids on my pans when I'm not looking. Oof, or the lids on my jars. You know what? I'm starting to think that I'm having migraine because I'm replacing so many words with others. All right, so now this is looking good. I'm going to add a bit of acid to it as well. I also didn't add salt to this, so I don't usually when I'm doing this with roving, but I would if I was dyeing wool flannel, which is what we usually use for rug cooking. All right, now the next color that I'm going to add to this is bottle green. It's kind of good that I took some water out of here because it's getting a little outrageous. Now you can see there's still a little bit of blue in here, and that's okay. I'm going to get my bottle green and put it in there. Let me see. There it is. I just relax. It comes to me. So I am using 1/4 teaspoon of color with these. But I'm going to use a scant one of this because it's kind of a dark color. Just the way I'm going to be pouring it in. Now, you know how I'm always saying with wool flannel, don't touch that when you're wandering, don't touch it. But now I'm going to, because just the way it is, the way fleece's natural way is, it's hard to get at it all because when it gets wet, it gets real puffy as opposed to this, which gets all flat and saddened. It's kind of interesting. So turning this up a little bit, I'm gonna add a little bit more acid. And now I'm gonna do some chatting about some things that I want you to remember, and I've already said some of them. So really be careful of temperature fluctuations. So even though I'm letting this kind of bubbly go, I'm still okay. So I can turn it down a little if you feel more comfortable not having it bubbling so much. But if I really started moving this, then that's when the trouble comes. So I'm gonna get a paper towel, clean up a bit of a mess. I always try to use a basket like I just used to carry that. You can use any old strainer or whatever, as long as you have something below it. It's kind of good to use something like that because it drains some of the excess water away too. You need to use more dye than you ordinarily would use with our wool flannel. I can't tell you the science behind that or why it is. But I just know from my experience of doing this for years, you need more. And so what I usually do is make like a bit of a heaping spoon, right? Just tinily heaped, not a mountain, so that I know that I'm going to get close to where I want to go value-wise. And I often like to add dye to the pan first. I don't always, and it depends how much volume there is. So I have quite a bit of roving in here. And I want to make sure that all of it gets covered. And if I just pour it over top, underneath I might have almost white, which is kind of fun too, because you can split them and you can have a light version and a darker version. That's all completely entirely up to you. I could have also went this way with my stripes and had really quick color changes. It all depends on what it is you want to achieve and you aspire to. I'm going to take a little check of this. Here's my little spoon. And it's getting close in some places to being done. So I'm going to have some pretty dark spots on the bottom. And you can see just from heat, it's getting lighter on the top. So that's okay with me too. Let's see what this one's doing. So all of those are good taker uppers. And this is boiling at a pace I'd prefer not. So I'm going to turn it down to about 215. Also, you'll notice I like to take the water from here, and this way I'm not keeping adding water and having an overflow, which is also important. So my next color is going to be red violet. I must be in a red violet kind of mood. Again, I'm using a quarter. It's time for me to get some more dyes out here. How about you? Are you running out of dyes? I know the shipping's very expensive and it seems ridiculous, but believe it or not, on every parcel, I get charged a gas surtax. It's like, it's ridiculous. The price of gas has gone down quite a bit, but they're still having us pay this goofy tax. Anyway, I apologize for shipping, but I can't afford to have free shipping. So then I just, oh, look at, there's quite a bit of happiness there. So I'm going to use that happiness. That's what happens when I'm yakking. I'm going to use this because I can pour it over here if I want. Because I have some kind of lightish areas and I don't mind seeing a little red violet appear in my work from time to time. Okay, so now I'm going to turn this down even further. Now, normally I would be moving around things like this more than I am. So I want to check and make sure that I have enough acid at this one end. I'm going to use my masher now to do some stamping. Now, it could be that I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, well, I'm not really seeing that beautiful turquoise I put in there. And that makes me a bit sad. So at this point, I can add turquoise. But I have to add it with this water. Oh, we're going to have quite a mismatch. But the good thing is the waters are the same temperature. And that's to be, you want that. That's to be happiness there. Okay, you're getting a little rambunctious spitting at me. All right, so I'm just going to pour this over the top. It's kind of weak, but I just want to reinforce that I want that turquoise in there. I want to see turquoise when I spin. Makes me happy. So now, let me see with this last one. Now all I have to do is put orange in, and I think it's okay for me to put orange in now. Once again, I'm looking for that happy coppery time every once in a while to appear. I'm going to turn it over a little. And this time I might add orange by sticking my wet chopstick down like I do when I do the Great Big Stew Pot. Because then that way I have more interesting things appear. And I can get it down in amongst the different parts of this fleece. But once I do this, I cannot stir it. Cannot move it. I just have to wait. Okay, so that looks good. Turn it up a little bit. Now that's not acting so wild. Let me check this one. See, I finally got everything under control. So I still have a little bit of turquoise down there. So one of the things is there's more water at this end than this end, just because of the way my table is slanted. You know all about that, right? Let's get our yarn ready. I have to use a different pot or a different pan. So I'm going to take this one and put it over to the side. But when this is all done being cooked, you want to be very careful. I usually just leave it in here until it's perfectly cool, or I might pour it into something like this and let it cool down. I don't immediately rinse it with water. I don't get excited to see how it looks because I have to be having some patience. So let me put it over here. You can see it's quite beautiful. That's going to be nice to spin. Maybe I'll do that on Sunday Circle. I'm going to put it on the floor, I guess, because I've run out of counter space. And this is the pan I like to use when I'm dyeing yarn. And I have a reason why. I'm going to talk about it in a second as soon as I get this plugged in. It's important that I have power. Okay. Let's make sure this is off. You're my bubbly and noisy creature over here. I can see bits of grass in there too still. That's funny. All right. So our yarn. I don't usually put, let me get a hank of it here. I usually put dye in the bottom of this. So here's my hank. It's tied off. If you don't feel these tie-offs from the hank company or the yarn company are good enough, you can put more of your own on. And if you wanted to have fun, you can even resist by tying something tightly around it, and then it won't get so dyed. So I lay it in like this, and then I make a bit of a cross. So I force all of the, I force 4 points into the middle and 4 points out to the corners. So it looks a little bit like a clover leaf. Do you see that? So I push this in here and I push this in here. All right. So I usually, when I'm doing this, I'm going to have to keep borrowing water from there too. Marrying everybody together with my borrowing. I will sometimes put a little something in here too. And I'm going to do that today. And the little something I usually like to use is a nylon, but you can also, this is just a single nylon, and I don't worry about what happens to it. It's just to kind of catch excess stuff. I guess I'll wet it. That's nice, although it gets wet pretty quickly. So I'm going to put that there, but you could also roll up a nice little 1/16 of wool and stick it in there too. And you'll soon find out why. So when I do this, I like to work in crosses. So I'll go this way with one color, and then I'll go this way with another. And then I start filling in those kind of pie-shaped lines until everything has dye on it. So let's get started with that. I'm going to turn this up so I have good hot water. So I'm going to start with blue violet. What a happy color to see in the fall. We don't see it very much except in asters. And I always love seeing a little bit of blue violet, which is really violet. I don't know why they call it that, but I'm stuck with that. So I'm going to use 1/8 this time. I want to be careful of the amount of water that I'm using. I don't want to use too much and I don't want to use too little. So I want to have enough to make sure I'm going all over. Not so much that I'm drowning this wool, because I can always use my masher to push the wool down in, like you saw me do with my fleece, down into the water. I'm just going to add a little bit more. Also, I can add my acid right now if I want to. I find it tedious to add to my each dye. I don't have time for that, and I get irritated by it too. So I'm just going to add it now. And I'm going to turn this on. I like to add one color and wait a bit. So I'm going across like this and across like this with the violet. And then I take my, I can use my masher, I can just use this measuring cup or a jar, and I'm really pushing down on this. It's interesting to see the color difference between the nylon and the wool too. So fiber that we're dyeing makes a difference to how it appears as well. So now I'm going to prepare the next color. I'm going to turn this on. Come on, you. Snap, snap. My next color is going to be moss. I already have this interesting, like, violety, coppery, or it was until I just stirred the violet spoon in there because there was a bit of orange in the other one. So same with this. I'm going to now oppose that first X by making a cross. Over a little bit so you can see me better. So here we go. Look at my cross. So sometimes you run out a little bit. That's okay. Just let that happen. If you feel you need to add more later, that's okay too. I'm gonna add 2 more colors. I don't really like how agitated it's getting. I'm going to have to be careful just to leave that right in there until tomorrow so it can cool down or later in the day. Orange. Oh, that's exciting. I just want to go back to getting dye. So I just want to let everybody know the shipping is a lot, and I apologize. It's kind of out of my hands. But the more dyes you order, the more cost effective it is because it doesn't really change the amount of shipping. There's like kind of a flat rate, and you can get quite a bit of dye before you're exceeded that. So you can see I ran out of orange there. That doesn't make me happy. So what I do is just mix up a little more. And I also want to, you want to make sure you get the same sort of saturation of orange in this water too. So it shows up the same. I'm gonna put that in there, and that makes me happy now. And now I've got to do my trick before it gets taken up. I want these colors to kind of blend and meld with each other. And you can see that tempered the brightness of that orange quite a bit, where it ran into greens and ran into purples. You can just see now I have the slightest amount of white showing. So I'm going to make another set of lines so that I can get that taken care of. Now, my last color is going to be New Brilliant Green. And you can use the old Brilliant Green, that's fine. This one is a little brighter and more vivacious. And it also needs more acid to take up. So I just want to talk about the roving for a minute. It's in that pan down there. And I will have to turn that pan back on once I'm off camera. And now I have to concentrate. Sorry, just give me a second. That girl can't dye yarn and talk too. All right. There we go. So I hope this has helped you realize what fun it can be to make these beautiful things. Let me see. I'm going to see if I can dump this into my, first I had an extra yarn, but I don't think we have time to dye it. So I'm gonna dump this into my sink into this bowl, so maybe we can have a bit of a look at it. It's a treasure. You know, I should have really, what I should have done, if I was wise, I could have just dyed it in this, and then I could have just lifted this out. But, you know, I didn't. So I'm gonna try to pour it in here so that I can show you easily. Woo. Now, it often happens, sorry with all the cleaning and banging. It often happens that the water will be kind of dirty after dyeing. Here it is, isn't it beautiful? Can hardly wait to spin that up. I'll turn it over so you can see the other side. So I've got lots of violets showing. And be real gentle. Toss it up a little bit so that you can see all the variances of color. And there's even a couple of areas where it's really light. Isn't that beautiful? Of course, you know, I'm a bit of a daughter of darkness, so anything dark's gonna make me happy. And here's some hay. All dyed, nothing happened, of course, because you know what? Our dyes cannot dye plant matter. All right, does anybody have any questions for me?
Hi, it's Ellen. Thank you
Hi,
very
Ellen.
much for doing my thing.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
And yesterday was my day because I got my electric skillet from eBay for only $17, including shipping. And it
Well
happens
done.
to be the square one that you are using there. I didn't do that on purpose. I just did it because I was cheap.
Yeah.
But so I got the so that's great. And but my question is, you
Yes.
on the oh shoot, the pot one you were doing,
Yeah,
you
this one.
said you didn't use salt.
No,
Now was
normally
that by design or by
Well,
accident?
wandering is a method that I have and it's well established, and I always ask people to put salt in it. But this acts quite differently than fleece, and we don't really need to have it. But you also saw, for anybody who knows how to wander, that I deviated wildly by sticking the orange in on the end of a chopstick. And that's just because of the nature of fleece that allows me those latitudes. And I was just letting people know, if you're not familiar with wandering, you can just do what I did if you're dyeing fleece. Yeah.
Great.
And I have often dyed fleece just as I'm dyeing this also. So there's many ways you can do it. And Ellen, do you remember when we were doing our layering work a few weeks ago? I don't know if you ever read the write-up about it, but I did think that if you can get muffin pans that make really big muffins. There's usually 6, and you could dye all like 6 different types with just a little bit of your yarn by just layering them up. You just have to use less water and less dye, and then you can use your little bits of yarn. Yeah. I don't know if you saw
that was that day was the one that inspired me to go get that pan, because I couldn't do what you were doing and I wanted to play along so bad.
Yeah. You can do that and do it in the oven, no problem. But you want to be able to match the size of your pan with your amount of your wool. Like, I don't know how many ounces this is, probably 3, almost 4 ounces maybe. So that's what fills this pan. And so you want to be judicious of that too. But you can also partition it if you wanted to with foil, so that you'd have little compartments, and the foil has to go, you know, you have to make like a little dish out of foil to set it in, and you can set 4 in, and I've done that before when I've been demonstrating things. Do you understand what that means?
I think so. You're saying just using them as to fill space, using foil.
Well, yeah, so that you can separate things and that you're not having like a mass overflow of this and that and the other thing. So the foil will keep each one that you're doing separated, because if you want to dye little tiny bits of wool, that's the way to do it. You can still use your frying pan, but you can't have an open swim. you gotta have people partitioned. You gotta have your wool partitioned, or else everything will look like everything else very quickly.
Right, it won't be any different than the pot, really, if it's.
No, as a matter of fact, it won't. Yeah. So even with this pot, like used an adequate amount of fleece for this pot. So dyeing little bits means you have to dye it in a little container. So if I was dyeing a little bit, I might just dye it in here, right? Or in a little jar and put it in the microwave. See, now I'm trying to make you buy something else. Not at all, but it is helpful. But if it's warm enough where you are, I forget where you live. You're in New York, right?
Yeah.
So you can also in the summer dye things just sitting right outside in jars. So it's hot when you begin the process. So you're not starting with cold water, and you just set it outside with the lid on it. In a couple of days, it'll be beautifully dyed. So yeah, perfectly
Well,
clear.
now that I have an electric skillet, I can take it out on the porch and
You sure
I don't
can.
have to worry.
You sure can, but just keep your amounts even to the space that you're using.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good tip.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any questions for me today? No questions. How many people have joined us?
17.
Oh, that's great. So I know that many of us don't think of dyeing yarn or wool or anything else like that, but when we've gone to all the work of dyeing up our beautiful fabric, it's really important that, say, our wool that we use for around the outside is equally beautiful. And even though we can buy nicely hand-dyed wools, I'm telling you right now, nobody dyes them like you will to match your work. So this would make a beautiful finishing yarn for the outside of a rug. If you are a whipper or even if you're a puncher, it's just great. So I also want to say I had to soak the monkey out of this yarn because it was so stiff with lanolin. As soon as I opened up the container, it was like it was right in the barnyard. So this is the importance of Synthropol 2. You really want to use it when you're dyeing these things. Okay, helps scour things away. So here's our yarn. And I'll show you our fleece in my write-up, but I'm pretty happy with how things worked out today. And as you can see, I'm gonna put this over in the sink to cool. As you can see, I don't have water in there, by the way. I have put a nylon in here to just soak up that little bit of turquoise. And I also want to show you this nylon. Ah, oh, mama quiero. So it has its own unique entertainment qualities from having been in the center, right? And I use this all the time. Many people who get kits from me will see that they're bound up with these. And we can hook with them too. So there you go.
I had one more question. What temperature do you start your, like,
well,
it has a little 100 to 300 or whatever?
I start at 3 and then turn it down to about 215 to try to control it a little bit. And that's about what that's what I did. And sometimes I had to turn it off if I found it was getting too emotional, getting too, too much stuff going on in the pan. So yeah. And if I wanted to, I could use my microwave for the next 2 hours and I could have like 25 or 30 colors just by putting jars in there. Like I can put 5 or 6 of these in at a time and I could have individual colors of roving. And it doesn't take very long. So how you do that, I want to go over that too, was of course you wet this. You put your dye with your water in here. You stick this in. Sometimes for the merriment of it, like if I put blue in here, I might want to put a little bit of turquoise on top just so I have some color variance, or blue violet, depending whether I want to warm or cool something. And yeah, so then I'll just put my acid in there and I make sure that I have moved this around so that it's all has dye in it, right? Basically. Then if there's not enough water, I want water to at least be an inch below. It's hard to push this down in the water, but I want it to be at least an inch below it if it's sticking up. You don't want to put too much water in because it'll overflow in your microwave. And I also make sure that in this case, I'll be adding acid to the dyes. And I just pop it in the microwave and I do it in 2-minute bursts until the water's perfectly clear. Once again, you have to cool this down. You can't immediately like throw it in water. You have to be careful or you're going to end up with it getting felted and it's hard to work with then. You can't separate it easily. It's difficult to spin. It's impossible to do fine dry felting with it, for instance. So be very careful what you do with this and your fleece as to your cooling. And I think that's all I have to say. Okay, thanks so much for joining me. I hope you all had a great time and you'll try dyeing some of these things because it's a lot of fun to have them. Even if you don't spin, you might be able to give a gift to a spinner and they'll just love you for it. I'll tell you that right now. Because I never ever see fleece that looks like this for sale. And so it's not something that everybody does. And it's really lovely to spin with. I just spin it right from this. I don't even card it out or anything. All right, my friends. Thanks so much. I'm so happy you came.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wanda.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Have a great weekend.
Thank
You
you,
too.
Wanda.
Bye. Thanks, Wanda.